Сайн байцгаана уу хүн төлөөлөгчтэй. Өнөөдөр ороо манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Олон Улсын Санхүүгийн корпорацийн төлөөлж Монголд ажилладаг ноён Дик Ранкен оролцож байна.
Ричард Ранкен. Дик Ранкен Олон Улсын Санхүүгийн корпорацид 30 жил ажилласан туршлагатай. Тус байгууллага нь өсч буй эдийн засгийн улс орнуудын хувийн сектор зөвлөгөө өгөх, санхүүгийн дэмжлэг үзүүлэх чиглэлээр үйл ажиллагаагаа явуулдаг. Дик хуучин зөвлөлт холбоот улсын бүрэлдэхүүнд багтаж байсан улс орнууд, Африк, Зүүн Азийн улс орнуудад ажиллаж байсан. Тэр 3 жилийн өмнө Олон Улсын Санхүүгийн корпорацийн Зүүн Аз номхон далайн бүс нутаг хариуцсан захирлаар томилогдсон. Австрали улсад хувийн хөдөө аж ахуйн бизнес эрхэлдэг бөгөөд Азийн хэд хэдэн банкны удирдах зөвлөлийн гишүүн, хөдөө аж ахуйн эдийн засаг бизнесийн удирдлагын зэрэгтэй. Эхнэр 3 хүүхэдтэй.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, JD.
What brought you to Mongolia?
I think it's one of the most exciting countries in the world, and I come here frequently, and it's nice to see you again.
I would like let's talk a bit about IFC as such, as an institution which is the world's largest probably institutions. Tell us the story and what is that you are doing in the IFC.
Okay, well, I had a career in IFC which went for about 30 years. IFC is the private sector part of the World Bank Group, and it was fairly small up until 10, 15 years ago, but nowadays it invests in all emerging markets about 20 billion US a year in hundreds of different kinds of projects ranging from health and education, microfinance, infrastructure, banking sector, etc. And its whole philosophy is the private sector is the biggest engine for creating jobs. IFC is prepared to take risks which other investors may not. And the point is to create sustainable jobs, particularly for poorer people. And the track record is good.
World Bank was created just after the World War. Correct. To create new economic order in the world.
Right.
And later on, when IFC was then built, and is ownership-wise, is every member of World Bank is also an owner of IFC accordingly?
Yeah, I mean, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development was set up in the late 1940s to reconstruct Europe.
Which is called World Bank, yeah?
Right. And IFC was set up in 1954 because there was a recognition that even then the private sector had an important role to play. As for ownership, I think there are almost exactly the same membership in the World Bank as in IFC.
Well, having said that, Mongolia is a member of World Bank. It has own share also in the World Bank and in IFC.
Correct.
And I think the governor of the central bank goes every year to your annual meeting, right?
That's right. Yes.
So we are a member of IFC and World Bank, and IFC is doing, you said, $20 billion a year investment in the developing countries.
Yes.
Which otherwise not is directly invested by, necessarily invested by the private sector.
Right. The idea of IFC is not to compete and push out the private sector, quite the opposite. So IFC's philosophy is to take risks, sensible risks, when the private investors are not yet willing to come, and thereby being a catalyst to make things happen faster.
You are living in Australia.
Correct.
And you are, at least quarterly, comes to Mongolia and somewhere else where IFC is sending you as a senior expertise who knows the kitchen of the company, etc. And you suddenly, as a global citizen on one side, on the other side as a professional that have been in IFC working for more than 30 years, how do you see the euro today and connectedly with Europe, the Europe and China relations economic ways?
It's very interesting you say that. Europe is going, your question was about Europe, right? Not about Australia.
Well, I mean, as a global citizen, you see all around the world and
Yes.
traveling.
Yes.
And in fact, I mean, before talking to Europe, I think it's euro is the most expressive thing today about what about the euro. Fukuyama said, who was in interview here, said that the euro, I mean, Greece should be already taken off. And why they are that long, he was surprised. Do you agree with him?
Yes, I do, to a large extent, because I think it's all, you bring it back to an individual level. If you live beyond your means for too long, somebody's going to have to pay the bill. And the way they are managing it at the moment, it seems like it's the next generation that's going to have to pay the bill.
Exactly.
So there needs to be some biting of the bullet rather than continuously pouring more debt in to solve the problem. So I'm not optimistic that there will be some great economic recovery in Europe until they sort out these fundamental issues about living within one's means.
Does it mean that these weaker countries, which keep being bailed out all the time somehow, will need to take out, and then Euro will remain with more tangible and stronger economies?
Barring a miracle, I think that's the most probable outcome, and that's going to cause some pain for some people, but probably better sooner than later, so they can then start to rebuild on a sensible basis.
Will it make completely... Now the China export to Europe is getting down.
Yes.
And with this, what we talk about scenario, how much will change that structure of Chinese export to Europe?
Well, I think by definition it's going down, but it's fortunate the world is a big place. So you have the Chinese domestic consumption, and you have what's going on in the rest of Asia. And I am also optimistic about the United States because they are able to reinvent themselves. So yes, we might see Europe demand reducing for Chinese and other production, but I think the world can continue and Europe can then come back later on. That's the optimistic scenario, JD.
Remember, for the last 2 years, there were economists all around the world who were saying that even the world economy goes down, Europe including, China has a capacity to develop domestic market which will replace that foreign demand.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it depends a great deal on the policies, but I think that is the path forward.
That's what is, why I'm asking is because Mongolia is
very much
so much related with China. And our export of coal and copper in particular will depend on Chinese import, and which is the case.
I think that Mongolia has one big advantage. I mean, it has quite a few that I could talk about, but transport cost is very significant. If you're comparing coal from Australia, coal from other countries versus coal from Mongolia, then cost of delivering coal into China is a big advantage.
By the way, Mongolia, some say that we have overcome Australia in terms of import into China or export into China. What is the reaction in Australia about that? Because suddenly there is a young small country comes and replacing your export, which is substantial revenue.
It certainly is substantial revenue, and we just need to recognise in Australia that demand goes up and down, and we hope we have an economy there that can adapt to these changes. In the last global financial crisis, Australia was one of the very few countries that never had a recession.
Including your banking sector.
Exactly. So it's quite a well-managed economy. And I say hats off to Mongolia for putting in place the rules, the governance, the laws to encourage the investment which enables it to overtake Australia with these exports.
By the way, Australia was also, I mean, still a bit lower extent, but before it was also quite sort of developed as a mining dependent country in a way.
Yes.
And in order to be like Australia, for Mongolia, what does it take, number one, to be like this, like Australia?
Number one, without question, you've just had an election here, and it's a peaceful transition. And when you think about it, JD, there are not too many countries in the world that you can say that about. So number one building block is to have a working democracy, even if it's a bit messy, and that's what you have in Mongolia, and I just take my hat off to it. On top of that, you need sensible policies, stability, so that if investors come, they know the rules, and they can put a lot of money into building environmentally sound, world-class operations. And I think that seems to be happening. Of course, there's a healthy debate, as there should be. But I'm optimistic that Mongolia has got the recipe basically right. And I think one other thing I would say is, when I visit here, education. I mean, I've worked in Africa, and I've worked in the former Soviet Union and elsewhere. Education is one of the other vital building blocks to succeed in the economy and as a society. Mongolia, people go to school for 12 years. This is an amazing advantage.
Everybody must. Yes.
Yeah.
But still, of course, you said two things. One is the democracy, the democratic value establishment. Second is education. Actually, we try both. A lot of hurdles to overcome now. One of the major block to support this is a financial sector.
Correct.
In Mongolia, unfortunately, financial sector is, we talk about only money market instead of capital market, and we are basically dominated by banking sector. And our investors, domestic investors, we may say so, they have no choice.
Right.
So, and how do you see this sound financial market development, capital market development in this country?
To have the right laws to encourage the development of the capital markets. There's no point in hoping without putting in place the right kind of legislation and regulations. Part of that is to have a well-functioning central bank, Bank of Mongolia. Part of that is to develop the stock market. Part of that is to make sure that banks are run in a manner that is open, transparent, and that they have to keep, enough safety factors in place in terms of liquidity and capital so that they don't go out of business at the first sign of bad news. And while you might say there's not been all that much development, when you look at these different ingredients, Mongolia is making progress. I mean, the LSE, London Stock Exchange, is working with the Mongolian Stock Exchange to build up their capability.
Infrastructure-wise, technically, now this country can be run by in London, but human infrastructure-wise, I think we need to report decently and through information, and then that confidence building of investors, right, including Mongolians. And IFC being a shareholder of how many banks in Mongolia?
Two.
Two banks.
Yes.
Which is Hasbank and Han Bank.
Yeah.
And you have been on the board of Hasbank for quite some time.
I have. Yes.
And you see somehow probably the bank, Han Bank, etc. What is? I mean, you following this financial documents of Hasbank. Where you think Mongolian banking sector is going? How does it? I mean, in general, we have so much high interest rate.
Yes.
So much high loan rate, credit rate. How will survive? I mean, how a business can survive in Mongolia with over 2% loan interest rate a month?
You've got the macroeconomic policy. If you have an inflation rate of, 14%, and you want to make money in the banking business, then you have to have a spread that's above that and above your cost of funds, so it pays for your operations. There are interesting examples of, if there was no banking sector, there would probably be money lenders, and so instead of people having to pay,
we call it Lombard,
in the teens, they might be paying 60%.
Exactly.
We are on a path to greater availability of funding for business. It requires the banks to have access to funding themselves. And to my mind, apart from good management and good governance and a strong central bank, what's needed at the moment in Mongolia is the banks don't have actually access to sufficient funds to lend to people who want to expand their business. This is a major constraint. And I think a number of the banks are now looking to see if they can bring in partners from outside Mongolia to help supply that kind of funding?
Yeah, you have mentioned that the inflation, which is about 14%, is the major stumbling block of having so much high interest rate in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
The depositors looking for a higher interest rate than the inflation, otherwise it will not have a sense. You buy something and you keep it home, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, that's very interesting issue. We'll go there. Before that, Dick, I mean, how we can keep that inflation manageable? How our government keeps promising, every government keeps promising here, we will have inflation under 1 digit.
Right.
But the result is always 2 digits. So what we should do?
I go a step back. You have now elected a new government. People are educated here. There's access to plenty of advice on how to do this, and it's up to the government to decide what kind of macroeconomic policies it wants to have. For example, giving money out to people, which is a nice thing to do, who then go immediately and spend it on consumption, is a way to fuel inflation. So there's a balance. And of course it's up to the government to decide that balance. So they need to have a set of policies which make the promise of having single-digit inflation likely rather than unlikely. And this is all a matter of policy for the government to choose.
Is inflation had to do with, I mean, with the same talking about cash to people, government always keep increasing public officers' salary, which is a substantial amount of people. I think about 10–15% of our workforce is there. And is inflation connected with productivity of economy, productivity of particular sectors?
There's no question. And one can't give continuous pay increases to people beyond what the economy can generate in terms of growth.
Beyond the value they create.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about more now back to the banking sector. Well, banking sector is growing phenomenally in this country. Today, we are from under banked economy, we are coming to the economy where banking sector asset equals to GDP about.
Right.
And in some countries it should go even upper, more than this one. Then we will have good liquidity, right? And then I have one problem with that. The problem is larger companies of Mongolia are served by foreign banks already. And they even don't go to domestic banks, which has no sense with this 2% per month interest rate, while they can find, say, 6 to 8% from abroad. Then wouldn't it will have a sense having those foreign banks working inside of Mongolia, so that the SMEs also have the access to them, which can provide cheaper money? What do you think?
There's going to be an evolution. The existing Mongolian banks are doing well in financing a lot of the SMEs. In the case of Haasbank, also microfinance.
Yes.
For herders, for all sorts of small retail kind of businesses, and that's vital. What the Mongolian banks do not yet have the capacity to do is provide meaningful finance for the big projects. And they go offshore to finance, and in fact IFC is playing a role in helping mobilize offshore money for these bigger projects.
The bridge, yes.
And what I see, I mean, it may not happen immediately, is that you'll get foreign banks wanting to build partnerships with local banks.
Yes.
So they bring in this capacity. But I don't see that happening overnight. And I think what has to happen is that the banks need to build their capacity to do small business and corporate banking, build their access to getting funding to finance that. But this is not going to be like happening tomorrow.
Yeah, but however, recently there was a new FDI, foreign direct investment law, which specifies banking sector as a strategic sector. If somebody wants to invest more than 51% in a banking company, then they have to apply for zillions permissions and the government decisions. How is it? What is it? Why?
Every country deals with the issue of foreign investment and foreign control of their national assets in different ways. And to put a perspective on it, I come from Australia. Australia has a thing called the Foreign Investment Review Board, so that if, for example, a Mongolian or a Chinese company wants to buy a significant asset in Australia, then it is reviewed by the government. This is not much different to what Mongolia is saying.
In a way.
And so I think, you know, one can say 51% or whatever. Again, that can be changed if the government feels they've got their hand on what's happening. So, yeah, I think free flow of investment is vital. But yes.
You have been working in African countries. Have you seen an African country that had a problem because they have opened their banking sector to foreign banks?
No, I think the reverse actually. I think that I've seen problems where there are protective barriers put up
exactly.
which prevent best practice coming in and prevent capital flowing in.
Exactly. That's why what I mean is the capital flow in and out should be more free. Those open economies will have a more chance to be developed rather than the closed ones, right? Because every protection requires certain bureaucratic intervention.
No question.
Which is always interconnected with corruption usually.
Yeah.
Well, having said that, you have been following this Hasbank and the Tinguru Financial Group and banking this very successfully growing bank, right? Worldwide well known, one of the top world microfinance bank in the world.
Absolutely.
What does it take to be like this, even in a country like Mongolia with the economy we have talked? How come that makes the success?
Okay, few things. And it's true, I've seen many, many banks in different countries. You've got to have trust. And the customers have to be able to see why they should trust a particular institution with their money. That means that, among other things, you need good corporate governance, so it's all transparent, how a decision's made. Hasbank is in very good shape on this because the shareholders are not in the pocket of some corporation coming from all over the world as well as Mongolian. So it's a very strong board of directors. In addition, and this is really interesting, I've noticed a lot of people coming back from overseas to help Mongolia. Mongolians coming back, right? Repats. What we see in Hasbank, and it's unusual, it's the exception from any other bank, is that the entire management from the CEO on down to the teller, all Mongolian. It's not filled up with foreigners. This Mongolian management, in my view, is probably one of the strongest management teams in any business in Mongolia.
I'm a part of it somehow. And
absolutely.
I know it was the only institutions where you have very clear and only one information for inside and for outside.
Correct.
That was something I think I liked very much. And also that's a part of a good governance, right?
Yes.
Information to be one and true, on time, and to everybody at the same time, even it's good or bad.
Yes.
And well, this is we call it, it's just a part of many ingredients of good corporate governance.
Exactly.
What else is that consists from?
Okay, you've got I mean, in any company you have the shareholders, you have the board, and you have the management. And good corporate governance is about what are the relationships between those. For example, if you have a single strong shareholder, that will probably have huge influence on everything, and that can be unhealthy. What we've got in Hasbank is a very good balance and clearly documented, so anyone can come and see what is the statement of ethics, what is the function of the board, what are the rules governing behaviour of the staff. All these things contribute to having a transparent bank that you can trust.
I saw a lot of materials, and I see in their practice, IFC does practice this good corporate governance very seriously and disseminated that culture all around the world.
Yes.
And probably this is one of the reasons why IFC is successful. What do you think?
I think there's no doubt about it. And the point I want to make is that it's one thing to say you're good at governance and have all the reports and documents on the shelf. It's quite another thing, JD, to actually make it happen so it becomes part of the culture. So people from the bottom to the top are always thinking, what is the decent thing to do? What is the transparent thing to do? I think we've got that in Haasbank. We certainly have that in IFC because IFC tries to lead the way on this. It tries to set some example on governance, sustainability, and so forth.
And probably for me, each employee in the morning when they go to their office, they feel like, you know, they are part of a big mission. You do something not only for your own salary. You are with the team and on the right mission. That mission makes many people, your country, your world better, right?
That's right. I think it's like what you do. When you get up in the morning, you must feel what you do is making a difference through all this excellent work. I think it's the same with people who work for good organizations like Haasbank, like IFC. Get up in the morning and say, wow, I like this. I want to get stuck into the work.
Probably in Mongolia, we used to, and now we keep talking about all the time about mineral resources, natural resources, and yet we talk a bit less than probably it's required about the most expensive asset, human resources.
Yes.
And that human resources, we should understand, I think, that corporate governance will make your company competitive.
Yes.
And your people, your employee, feeling like we have just now talked. Hey, Dick, tell us about, I keep hearing that you guys are, Mongolians are investing in China. What do you mean?
This is a fantastic story. It's not quite like Genghis Khan, right? It's a different kind of adventure in China.
Invasion.
No, it's not an invasion. But in Haasbank, we built up tremendous expertise in the field of microfinance, which means financing for individuals, very small loans, to help them get on their feet. Now Haasbank has become a bank not just for small businesses, but for bigger businesses, a full commercial bank. We have this expertise, so we were thinking, okay, what can we do with it? We looked around the region. We looked at many alternatives. In Urumqi in Western China, huge trading center on the Silk Road, hundreds of thousands of traders, small traders, paying 60% to money lenders, right? We went and did a big survey there.
Like just before our microfinance banking established.
Correct.
Early 90s, probably.
This sort of thing. And not just Chinese, but lots of minorities, right? And lots of Kazakhs coming and Mongolians there. So we decided, okay, this is a very good opportunity for us to help these traders get better financing, build their business, be more transparent. Now we have finished, or almost finished, the process of getting about 18 licenses.
Wow.
It's not so easy. IFC, aside from being an investor through Tenga Financial Group, is also a direct investor in this, along with 2 Chinese partners. And Tenga Financial Group is the controlling partner. Haasbank has an agreement with the Chinese subsidiary to provide a lot of Mongolian know-how and expertise to build the bank. So I think this is one of the greatest stories you can imagine.
In a way, Mongolian financial institutions goes to China, invest there.
Yes.
And bring also Mongolians to work there to introduce that culture.
And Mongolian know-how.
Know-how.
You see, it's not just about money, but here in Mongolia, in Haasbank, we have a body of knowledge, and I mean, Haasbank is recognized globally as being one of the best microfinance banks. Bring that expertise. It's a wonderful story.
I think that's what this small economy to grow, not only in the case of one institutions. If Mongolia, all companies are looking outward, and having such access like this to huge market like China.
Yes.
And do you think there will be, in your mind, there will be certain areas that Mongolians can do it?
Look, I think with education, and I think Mongolians have a good sense of independence as well. You would have to, wouldn't you, living with Russia there and China there.
It's the only country dealing with both 2 giants at the same time, and
I
for almost 1,000 years.
Yeah, this is a big challenge, but my experience of people in Mongolia is that you are up to the challenge. It's not easy to balance things. I think it's very good that we see some Mongolian investment going into China, not all the other way.
Dick, let me ask you a few questions as a professional, as an individual that has, you have agricultural background, right?
I do.
And there still you are farming there.
Exactly.
So how come you combine all this?
I grew up on a farm, remote Australia.
Which part?
Is New South Wales, which is in the drier part.
Okay.
And that was tough because there was no electricity and no floorboards and so on, but we had a good school. But then we had a big fire and everything got burned, so I had to say to myself, okay, what next? And I was very fortunate that after a few jobs I got a job with the World Bank, learned about IFC. Fast forward, IFC invests in Hasbank. Here I am in Mongolia. How lucky can you get?
You know, Phoenix, you go out of the ash.
Well, I don't know about Phoenix, but you know, it's all about opportunity and getting the right education, I think. And I see all these people coming back to Mongolia, Mongolians, repats. You know, it's a similar story in a way. They've gone, they've got well educated, they've come back to make a difference. And in a way, it's people doing what they really feel they'd like to do.
What is for a young being as a teenager or a student, when it's hard times come, which happens always, what is the most important thing?
When hard times come?
Yes, what makes you stay there and go through?
Well, you have to know what you stand for. You have to have something, I mean, you read it in books, but it's true. You have to know what you stand for in terms of values. And you have to have, if you can, good people around you. But I think this is one of the things about good governance. If we go back, I was saying one thing's a report on the shelf. Another thing is to have a CEO in the bank, Mongolian, who says, I stand for this, and I really believe it in my heart. And that's what I mean by one sort of value.
What is the most important value for you?
Well, that is a really interesting question. And I would hope that it is a combination of having some grace. I brought up on a rough farm, right? And I can be very blunt. And I've decided I need to be, you know, a bit better at that. But I think things like having the courage and being willing to take a risk on yourself, these are the important things to me.
Risk is something, yes.
You got to believe that you could do something even if it's hard and often fail.
Dick, you are father of?
Three children.
3 children. How old are they?
34, 30 and 27.
27. And what is the most important one thing that your children have it all the time, and you as a father make sure they have it? The character. What is that the feature of the character?
Well, again, it's simple and it's about the practice, but it's about treating others as they want to be treated. This is a fundamental point.
Well, Dick, you have been doing a great job, and this experience being reflected in this country, I am sure that many Mongolians working with you and see that and have this this energy. And what you do in Mongolia is great. Thank you for that work. I mean, not necessarily you are well off already. You are doing what you like, you're farming and doing and traveling. But still, it takes hard to come like this in every quarter and working hard. And 3 days, 4 nights working, and you'll come back.
It is an honor, and it's really good fun too.
Like everything what you said today, I think many Mongolians, young people will read. Those who does not speak English will read the subtitle, and that will make helping them one day when they have a difficult time.
Terrific. Thanks very much, JD.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
Wonderful.